Thank you, Mitch. Yeah, Ian, regale us with tales of service entry.
So I think generally our consensus was to try and emulate how we resolve service entry conflict for sidecar, like behaviorally, which today for sidecar, it's a little bit different because the sidecar represents like a single sort of view. But we do sort that, and then we do take the oldest service entry definition of a host name for that view. And so I think we want to try and do something similar to that, with the caveat being that that needs to occur at least partially in the data plane for ambient, because ztunnel does not have that like singular view. Is there anyone who's like firmly opposed to that concept?
Sounds good to me. I mean, predictable semantics between sidecar and ambient is probably a good thing, generally speaking.
All right. I think since we don't have like code urgency, I can probably like mock some stuff up there about what that would look like, and then we can go from there. We do, I guess, also have a bit of an issue with what happens if the host that you put in a service entry happens to conflict with a Kubernetes service. To my mind, there's like two reasonable things you could do there. You could say that's always forbidden, and that's what we sort of do today on the tip of master, at least. The other thing you could say that's, I think, fairly reasonable is that's allowed, but you can only override the service for your own namespace. You should never be able to have that definition affect some other namespace and take their traffic away from the proper like canonical kube service. So we could sort of do either of those.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Do folks have strong opinions, I guess, about the cube use case? Like capturing a cube service or hijacking a cube service for your own particular namespace? Do we know of anybody who like does mock testing or something like that using a pattern?
Don't we do that in tests?
Override for your own namespace, like sidecar, I don't think allows that.
Not the own name. Okay, it's the same namespace. Never mind.
Yeah, overriding for a different namespace, that's fine. In your own namespace. But like the resolution logic in sidecar at least has been that your own namespace takes precedent and then Kubernetes services take precedent.
Yep. Okay, that's what I thought a reasonable implementation should be. So I can work towards that as well. I think from my perspective, that's good enough to sort of move this forward. So we can call the topic closed unless someone else has opinions, thoughts. All right, sounds good. I think Mitch said he was having AV problems. Oh, go ahead, Keith.
I just had a quick topic that popped up. I don't actually think Lior is here. I'm just curious to sort of get to refresh sort of my understanding of the status of GAIE support, of the inference extension support within Istio. Right now, it's in alpha. And I know there is some discussion about the approach early on. If we were to try to make a decision on that, it's been alpha for a couple of releases. They're still sort of moving forward, but the inference extension did get to V1 inference pool recently, and at their I think their V1 release. So wanted to figure it might be a good time to check in to see like, are we okay with the current approach for GAIE with using virtual service, etc., with the xproc per route and everything like that, or do we anticipate that we'd want a more thorough or robust or a different approach for like production ready in GA when it comes to implementation? Does anyone care about the implementation? And it's just
We're
a
still
matter of
creating the shadow service, right?
yeah, you're still doing the shadow service, managing the shadow service, etc.
Does the current approach work with ambient and sidecars, or only through gateways?
Good question. So it only works through gateways today. I looked at doing this for ambient, but there was some. Oh yes, I think there. I asked this in the GAIE channel, and it's sort of strange to me thinking about like trying to understand what it means to do uh, inference because there's no front end for an inference pool. And so for the waypoint doing matching, like how does a client say, hey, I want to go and do inference for this service when there's no like there's no front end for the waypoint to match, I guess, if we're a client to send to. So that part's sort of undefined upstream as I understand it. And so I'm not sure what the waypoint like ambient support would look like.
Isn't that kind of what the shadow service is? Or I guess we don't give it a name that's appropriate though.
Right. So like at the gateway layer, traffic gets to the gateway, and you say that
Yeah, no, it makes
for
sense.
that route.
What you're saying. Yeah, I think upstream they probably would need to add a field that lets us assign a host name and or IP address like you can with gateways, probably, right?
Right. So like, well, the way that they do it in upstream is that just it's based on the backend ref. So like you assume traffic's gotten to your gateway, and then you have a route at that gateway that will have a backend of inference pool. So they just completely skip that first assignment step and assume traffic at the gateway. They would need to have some sort of way to let for serve to service inference to sort of say, I want to do inference for this thing and sort of make that standard. Do we think we need that to move this to anything beyond alpha? Like, do we need assurance on the ambient state of things, or is it enough for this to just be a gateway? If this is only ever a gateway feature, do we think that's acceptable?
I think it's a huge bummer. I don't know if I'd say it means that it cannot possibly move beyond alpha though.
I get that, yeah. I don't know. I don't think, just based on my discussion with people, there seems to just be zero. And if anybody watching the recording or is involved with GIE upstream wants to let me know I'm wrong or I didn't talk to the right people, let me know. There just seems to be no appetite for having a host name or having a front end of any sort for inference pool. When I was talking to people, I just got links back to the original discussion about why not service. Maybe I wasn't making my point super well.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're talking to all non-mesh people, they're not going to understand it, and so we need to go in a bit more forcefully, probably, and be like, hey, like, this is not viable for mesh unless you do these things. Like Robin, Robin Lee are definitely would understand the problem. So like I get why if I was a gateway, I'd be like, what are you talking about? I don't need a host name, right?
Yeah, I think it might be really helpful to get like just like one pager kind of why does this not work and what are alternatives to pitch to that group.
Yeah, that's fair. We can definitely do that. I think that'd be good for users. I think serve to service inference is probably a pretty important thing and likely relevant for maybe for multi-cluster. I don't know. I need to think about that a bit more. But that's fair. Ambient, like waypoint support aside, I know last in TOC this week we talked about sort of the generic extension plugin sort of idea. Do we think that xproc are we okay with sort of promoting the current approach to beta in GA? I think it's sort of my fundamental question. Or do we need to plan for sort of more extensive refactoring before we're okay with sort of making the feature beta? Honestly, I think this is maybe a John question because I remember you being involved with some of the initial design doc stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the implementation, but it's hard to suggest a change that, like, ultimately to do it the right way, we have to like fix so much of Istio in order to make that possible. So it's kind of hard for me to suggest that like what are kind of implementation details, even if they leak to the user, for this features to be blocked on like total rewrite of all of Istio essentially.
Is it, help me remember, is it the xproc, is it the per route configs issue, or?
The issue is that if you don't have a service, then we don't have a cluster. Like the per route stuff and like shoving it into extra, that part is fine, I think. Like, I mean, it's not amazing, but it's not terrible. You know, that's a code organization issue. It doesn't leak at all to the user or have any implications outside of being slightly hacky. But ultimately, there's absolutely no reason to make a shadow service, right? Other than that in our code, if we don't have a service, then we don't have this whole pipeline. And so just for example, like on a different project, I use CareT, and it's easy to just plug in inference pool as a third type of service that we create. But we don't use CareT in the Envoy code path for service discovery. And adding another one is like crazy complicated. So that's why it's tricky.
Yeah, okay. So this is sort of similar to what I mentioned, I think, last week about the multi-cluster version of that, where we don't have anything hooked up to do service discovery outside of our existing service semantics, service registry semantics. So yeah, that's fair that we'd have to do a lot of work to make that work. Which again, what makes it a bit more complicated for me is that we need to do that work anyway for inference pool import. Unless he also wants to hack around that like I did with service import. So I don't know. It's I don't think it needs to block to your point, but I continue to see more reason to do that refactor. Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, I would also say like we might go from alpha to beta to GA as well. So it's potentially something we say, hey, we'll finish this for GA, but not for beta.
Yeah, that's valid.
It could also change post GA. Like it is an implementation detail that's visible to the user, but in theory, the behavior of the system is unchanged, right? So
yeah, as long as we do a good job of cleaning up the shadow service and everything on upgrades for X number of releases, that's totally valid. All right, that's a reminder to me to go and write that refactor doc. Cool, thank you. We can consider that topic closed. Anything else? Any other topics from the audience? Okay, I think that's it. Release things. We're just a reminder, we're at code freeze. So only bug fixes at this point going in. There are some issues with docs tests. If anybody has time to debug them, I know that would be appreciated. Daniel had one fix. I added something, found something else that was wrong. So if anybody's got some time to take a look at why docs tests are breaking, I really appreciate that. All right, I think that's it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.